I've been in a bit of a TV rut for the past couple of months, which meant that I had to go back and rewatch all my comfort shows on a continuous loop. Funny enough is what sparked me to rewatch Gossip Girl 2021, which is the topic of today's video. It's been almost 2 years since the show's devastating cancellation, devastating to mostly me. Unpopular opinion, but I feel like it got canceled way too soon. The show received a lot of negative reception when it was first announced and while it was airing, which is to be expected because it is a reboot of a beloved show without any of the original characters or actors. The acting and the writing were the things that received the most negative reception, and thankfully I'm not here to defend those because that would probably be a much longer video and I don't know if I'm up for the task. What I am, however, here to defend are the fashion and styling choices of the show. Haters and even some fans alike criticize the show's costuming for being too basic, too trendy, not being realistic to the class of the characters, and overall not fitting that Gossip Girl aesthetic that they were once familiar with. I semi-firmly disagree with this for multiple reasons. First one being that it had been 9 years since the original Gossip Girl ended, so almost an entire decade full of things that heavily impacted the state of fashion. Second, they were telling stories of completely different characters. Not only were these characters high school students over a decade after the original Gossip Girl students, but they come from different backgrounds, racial identities, and sexualities that play a crucial part into their stylistic expression. And my last one being, if the reboot had just copy and pasted the 2007 Gossip Girl's aesthetic, people would have then criticized it for being uninspired and dated. Naturally, we're gonna have to do a little dive into the fashion of its predecessor show, Gossip Girl, the original, first. Gossip Girl. Gossip Girl, created by Stephanie Savage and Josh Schwartz, based on the book series of the same name by Cicely von Zegser, premiered on September 19th, 2007. The show follows a group of uber-wealthy private school students living in Manhattan's Upper East Side whose personal lives are constantly being talked about and exposed by an anonymous blog called, you guessed it, Gossip Girl. The biggest draw of the show is the absolute mess that is the lives of all these teenagers, somehow being both heavily unrealistic and relatable at the same time. The second draw, sometimes even surpassing the first, was the fashion. The iconic costuming of the show can be credited to the amazing mind of costume designer Eric Damon. He brought to life amazing moments like Blair's headbands, Chuck's scarves, Serena's love of a miniskirt and anything gold, as well as the highly controversial yet best dressed character that is Little J, Miss Jenny Humphrey. In order to create the styles we've grown to love for each character, Damon first read the book series that was inspiring the television show. He then went down to private schools in the Upper East Side to see how the private school girls were realistically styling their uniforms, and after that created mood boards for all of the characters. Social media platforms like Instagram didn't exist yet, YouTube didn't have its fashion space like it does have today, if any at all, so documenting outfits really wasn't a thing unless you wanted to have a blog, which the average person didn't. It's important to note that access to fashion was also much more limited. They weren't as bombarded with trends as we are today, meaning that the way that people understood trends and watched trend was completely different to what we do now. I wasn't old enough to be watching Gossip Girl when it was first airing or even when it ended. I think the first time I watched it, I was around 14, 15, and I've never been a massive Gossip Girl fan. I think this is why I don't feel that certain connection or protectiveness over it like some people do, and that's probably why I went into the reboot a bit more open-minded than like a die-hard Gossip Girl fan would be. The fashion also took a long time to grow on me because, like I said, I was like 14 when I first watched it, so concept of high fashion was always kind of ugly to me. If it wasn't leggings or colored skinny jeans or a graphic tee, I didn't want to look at it. Regardless of my uneducated tween opinion, the show was very fashion forward, even on the first season when they didn't have the resources to just pull from whichever designer that they wanted to. Styling of the show was bold, colorful, eye-catching, and flashy in a way that made sense for the time and the characters. It played heavily into that escapist nature, and it did its job well.
Been a minute. Did you miss me?
Fast forward to almost 10 years later, when not only fashion, but media and the cultural landscape have changed, and it's time to reimagine the show for a slightly different demographic. Tuning into the new Gossip Girl as an OG fan might have felt jarring for several reasons. It's technically not supposed to be catered to anymore, but it weirdly still tries to, and unfortunately it has that really off-putting, yellowy, ugly color of 2021 TV shows. Whenever people criticize the reboot's fashion for not living up to the iconicness of the original, I wonder if they know that Eric Damon costumes both of them. Reiterating my point from before, the expectation to have completely different characters from completely different generations sport the same looks as the original characters is completely baffling to me. The outfits accurately reflected our times, which I thought was a really good thing, but a lot of people had issues with this because the characters looked too trendy. Julien got so much hate for literally existing sometimes. People couldn't fathom the idea of a bald girl or a girl with a buzz cut being an it girl, which is literally why I felt like I had to defend her so hard. I just understood the vibes from jump, okay? Like I saw the vision. Damon explained that Julien's style started as a culmination of celebrities such as Kaya Gerber, Hailey Bieber, and Sophia Richie until he discovered Adat Akish, and that's whose style he ran with. After learning that fact, when I look at Julien's styling and her characterization of the cool girl who doesn't try that hard, it definitely works a lot more. I love the heavy mix of masculine and feminine pieces with an emphasis on oversized silhouettes because it was such a contrast from how all the girls dressed in the original and even most of them on the reboot. Especially in the setting, I think having a female character with a buzz cut posed an opportunity to try out different forms of accessorizing such as mixed match earrings and hair gems. I also personally loved that she was a Fendi and Dior girl because twins. Monet is like the polar opposite of Julien in a way. A bit more traditionally feminine, cunning, clever, and calculated, and much more traditionally wealthy. She's the closest to the styling of the original show, and I don't think it'd be a stretch to say that she's the closest to their personalities as well. We were going to see a spark of color in a very minimalistic show. It's primarily going to be coming from Monet's outfits. Damon did a great job of making her classic and refined preppy style not look out of place or like an old money caricature next to the other, sometimes more casually styled characters. One of the things I hated about Monet's styling, which is what I mentioned in said Instagram reel that doesn't exist, sorry, I don't really know why I'm still bringing it up, but it is her excessive change of hair. I totally get it. The actress Savannah Smith said herself, and I'm paraphrasing her words, that black women love to change their hair often, so obviously an uber wealthy black woman would change it as she pleases. The intention, totally fine. The execution, not the best.
That shit is clearly synthetic.
I have two general issues regarding this, and it's a little bit nitpicky. It might just be how I see the character, so you really don't have to agree with this. The first one, which is the nitpicky one, is just that the wigs were bad. I would not have a problem with this as much if the wigs were just like well-laid, nice quality wigs. How is there a show like Abbott Elementary where Ava is not meant to be uber wealthy, but she switches her hair up and her hair always looks good? The second one is more down to characterization. I just feel like someone as rigid and controlling and sometimes traditional as Monet wouldn't necessarily want to switch up her hair so much. I think she'd want a very homogenous, uniform look to her. Aki's style was a pleasant addition to the world of Gossip Girl men. He kind of gave the same energy as Julien with the effortless cool energy and like actually cool, not whatever the hell Chuck was trying to do every time he plays sports or whatever. Maybe I just have a thing for characters with buzz cuts, but I loved the pink buzz cut. I thought it added a fun experimental element to all of his outfits that felt authentic to someone like him. I liked how they used his hobbies to complete his styling, for example, using his different skateboards as accessories, even though I don't remember seeing him skate at all in the entire show. Shan was such a wild card because like I said before, I literally did not even remember that she existed. I didn't even like her character that much, but I love the inclusion of her because we finally got to see something like genuinely different style-wise in that entire group of people. In the original, we had Jenny and Vanessa who often went against the main four. Even though the show lacks color to begin with, I liked seeing a character with a much darker color palette sporting edgier pieces. She had a very unique sense of style which allowed her to stand out, but similarly to Monet, not look out of place. I like that even though she was more on the alternative side style-wise, she was still a very rich character meant to be on the inside, not on the outside looking in, a la Jenny Humphrey. I know anyone who watched the show absolutely hated the teachers, myself included, but I do have to give a little bit of a shout out to Kate and that one curly haired teacher that was always saying the most wild things. Kate's style was very polished and mature, maybe a bit too mature at times considering she was supposed to be 24 or 25, but it still worked perfectly for the character in contrast to her younger, much wealthier students. I also just like that other teacher style because she wore a lot of the patterns and prints that we'd see on the show, and it was a fun change of pace. This is a common complaint that I have to agree with, but there were just way too many characters on this show. The reason why a lot of characters weren't mentioned, even though I happened to really like their styling, was because there just wasn't enough to differentiate them from the people that I spoke about. Luna and Audrey don't dress the same, sure. One is more boho and one is more classic. Zoya is more chilled, low-key, and thrifty. While all of those things are interesting, similar style characteristics were already illustrated by Julien and Monet in a much better way. There isn't much to be said about them because when when you put them all together in a group, some of them just happen to fade into the background. There's absolutely nothing to say about Obi. Well dressed and inoffensively styled to the point where he could have just been a cool background character and wouldn't have made any difference. Max would actually be worth talking about if we saw more scenes outside of school, because I thought that's when his outfits really got their time to shine. That also brings me to my next point, that the characters were in school way too much. Kind of ironic, because that's the common complaint people have about teen dramas nowadays, that teens are never in school. Even if they had to be in school so much, it would have been cooler if they gave them different scenarios or school events that allowed for a change in uniform. I remember in the original Gossip Girl, there was an event or party in almost every episode, even though it didn't make sense and sometimes it was completely unnecessary. They do personalize their uniforms, it seems, a lot more than the original, but I would have loved to see these characters dressed up for more extravagant and luxurious events to showcase who they are when they aren't bound to the restrictions of a school dress code. It's a shame the show got canceled when it did, because I could only imagine and honestly hope for how much better it would have gotten by the third season. The second season was a bit clunky, but I do think the show really found its footing and the fashion really stepped up. Most of my favorite fashion moments for every single character came from this season. I'm not saying that this show was even close to being amazing, but it was still a frustrating and fun watch that I appreciate for what it was. Thank you guys for watching this video. I hope that you enjoyed it. Don't forget to follow me on my socials that are always linked down below, and I'll see you guys in my next one. Bye.